Good morning. My name is Marshall Gimple. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am an older, light-skinned man wearing a gray suit, a pink shirt, and a gray and pink tie. I'm wearing glasses. I have a beard on my face and not much hair on the top of my head. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone who is watching us on YouTube this morning. During the prelude, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're joining us from. If you're in Oklahoma City, what neighborhood are you in? And if you're elsewhere, what city or town are you in? And now, the prelude prepares us for worship. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Diana Davies. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And for those who are joining us today who are blind or have a visual impairment, I am a white woman with silvering hair wearing my autumnal stole today, in honor of Fallback, which is one of my favorite days of the year. At First Unitarian, we share our pronouns and self-descriptions in a spirit of inclusion. And in that same spirit, I want to remind you that we always have large print, orders of service, and hymnals available from our ushers. Within our Unitarian Universalist faith, there is a tendency to privilege mind and matter, to assume that all facts are the result of physical processes, that reality itself is entirely physical, material. But because we aspire to be lifelong spiritual seekers, it's good to be reminded sometimes that there are other ways of experiencing the world, other ways of being spiritual. And so for the next 2 weeks, we'll consider different traditions that focus not on reason and the material world, but on spirit, on mystical consciousness, and direct communication with the divine. Today, we'll be talking about an ancient school of thought called Gnosticism. But first, let's center ourselves with words of the 14th century Sufi poet Hafiz. Sufism being a mystical tradition within Islam. Forget every idea of right and wrong any classroom ever taught you. Because an empty heart, a tormented mind, unkindness, jealousy, and fear are always the testimony you have been completely fooled. Turn your back on those who would imprison your wondrous spirit with deceit and lies. Come, join the honest company of the king's bakers. Those gamblers, scoundrels, and divine clowns, and those astonishing fair courtesans who need divine love every night. Come, join the courageous who have no choice but to bet their entire world that indeed, God is real. I will lead you into the circle of the beloved's cunning thieves, those playful royal rogues, the ones you can trust for true guidance, who can aid you in this blessed calamity of life. Look at the perfect one at the circle's center, who spins and whirls like a golden compass beyond all that is rational, to show this dear world that everything in existence does point to God. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn. This is one we have not sung before. So be generous with yourself and others. It's number 335 in the gray hardbound hymnal, When Once My Heart Was Passion Free. And our choir director, Ebuka Zekacha, will lead us in this hymn.
When my heart was passion free to learn of things divine, the soul of nature suddenly outpoured itself in mine. I held the secrets of the deep and of the
Please be seated.
I was absolutely delighted when I heard the topic of today's service would be Gnosticism. I came across Gnostic texts years ago and was fascinated and am still fascinated by them today. And that's not surprising, given my interest in both history and comparative religion. I'll keep my comments at the lectern brief, but anyone who wants to have a nice, nerdy conversation about Gnosticism can find me in Daniel Hall after the service. So who were these people called Gnostics? They were a group of early Christian writers, teachers, and philosophers who were active between the 2nd and 4th centuries of the Common Era. The term Gnostic is derived from the Greek word gnosis, which referred to knowledge in the sense of understanding or wisdom. They were not a single group, however. They held widely varied views and represented a broad array of beliefs. They tended to claim to have access to a special knowledge, a special spiritual knowledge. So their detractors lumped them all together under the name Gnostic, which was used as a derisive term, not a compliment. Ultimately, those detractors won the day. They succeeded in having the Gnostics declared heretics. The Gnostics were forced to either accept church doctrine or be excommunicated. Their teaching was banned, and their texts were ordered to be destroyed. They were largely erased from the Christian historical record. Now, as I said, it's very hard to generalize about the Gnostics, but at their core, they differed from what emerged as Christian dogma in both their view of the condition of humanity and their method of relating to the divine. Christian doctrine came to be defined by the view that humanity lives in a state of sin, and if he persists in that state of sin, he risks eternal damnation. The one and the only way out of this state was through absolute acceptance and adherence to church dogma, combined with absolute faith in the redemptive power and the saving grace of the risen Christ. In contrast, the Gnostic contended that the condition of humanity was not so much sin as one of ignorance and confusion. The way out of this condition was not through a blind adherence to an external doctrine, but rather through a process of self-knowledge and self-discovery. At the deepest level, self-knowledge would lead also to a knowledge of God, and would lead to a realization of the truest nature of humanity. The catch here is that some Gnostic writers asserted that this deep knowledge was not accessible to everyone. It required both special training and special aptitude. Theirs was an esoteric knowledge, one which is available only to a few. Now, I wonder what the Christian church would have been like if it had been able to at least tolerate these Gnostic thinkers in their community. I feel like a certain spark of creativity and energy was lost when the Gnostics were suppressed. But then again, the builders of the church, the Christian church, weren't interested in creativity and intellectual energy. They were interested in building an institution that would be stable, that could be effectively administered, and that would include large numbers of people. They built an institution on the Roman model, which was structured and hierarchical, and they were extremely successful. I also wonder what would have happened if the various Gnostic groups had tried to band together in the face of their opponents. Now, they certainly would have had to use a different organizational model than the one that prevailed in mainstream Christianity. I think their organization would have looked more like the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, but probably even more loosely connected. Like the UUA, they would have had to work through some challenges to be effective. They first would have had to find some common ground among their various communities. They held some things in common, but on certain points they were actually diametrically opposed. At least UU congregations have a common heritage in Unitarianism and Universalism. While they emphasized individual self-knowledge, to be successful as a broader religious movement, the Gnostics would have needed to find a balance between individual spiritual practice and communal worship. I believe modern UU congregations sometimes grapple with this issue also, this issue of balancing individual spiritual development, social action, and communal worship and ritual. The Gnostics certainly would have had to confront the issue of elitism if they wanted to be viable in the long run. It's hard to be inclusive in any real way if you claim that your spiritual path is only accessible to a select few. Modern UUism claims just the opposite, and it works very hard, I believe, to be inclusive. Sometimes, though, I think we engage in a subtle kind of intellectual elitism that stems in part from our Unitarian roots. I also think that we sometimes translate our shared values into political stances, which we then use as a kind of litmus test to determine who belongs here. In doing so, we may exclude other points of view and fail to acknowledge that others may share our values and still have different ways of achieving them. Ultimately, the Gnostics faced overwhelming challenges and opposition. The UU faith community, in contrast, may have its issues, but they aren't insurmountable. As long as we stay in conversation and in covenant with each other, we can work through our challenges and become stronger than ever. Unlike the Gnostics, we can remain vibrant and relevant for many decades to come.
My name is Larry Little. I'm a short, gray-haired man with my Sunday best shirt on, wearing a voice button. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm wearing this button because I'm a member of Voice. Every Sunday we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of November, our Change for Change partner is Voice. Voice, which stands for Voices Organized in Civic Engagement, is a coalition of dues-paying congregations, nonprofits, worker associations, and schools that have come together out of a deep sense of mission and concern about the pressures families face in the Oklahoma City area. They work to better understand those pressures by listening to the experiences of the people in member institutions. They then engage those impacted in better understanding the issues and learning to work effectively for improvements that benefit all. First Unitarian is proud to be a long-term active member of Voice. And speaking of Voice, this would be a good time to ask you to save the date for an important upcoming event. On December 3rd at 3 p.m., Voice will be holding a forum on the arena vote. We hope to get 100 people signed up from First UU. For those of you who are in the sanctuary with us today, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate. We know that many of you prefer to mail in a check or make your donations to Change for Change online. You can always make your gift by mailing a check to First Unitarian. Just write Change for Change on the memo line or make an online payment through our website, oneuc.org.
please join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation? I invite you to get comfortable in your seat, to settle in. And it feels appropriate today to offer an ancient Buddhist meditation, a metta meditation or loving kindness prayer. We'll begin by offering good wishes to ourselves. So I invite you to focus on yourself, look inside. And as I say these words, you can whisper them after me, or you can say them silently. May I be peaceful. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be free. And now I invite you to bring to mind someone you know and love very dearly. And with a picture of that person or being in mind, we say, may you be peaceful. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be free. And now this may be a little more difficult, but I invite you to think of a person you don't know. It might be a child in Gaza, or an Israeli family with a hostage still not accounted for, or a person in Ukraine, or a person right here in this country living in poverty or in a state of fear. See if you can visualize that person. And now we wish for them. May you be peaceful. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be free. And even more difficult, this time I ask you to think of a person that you don't like very much. Not an enemy, not someone who's really harmed you. We won't go that far today. Just someone you would prefer not to be around if you could help it. And we're going to stretch and extend these wishes to this person. May you be peaceful. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be free. And finally, I invite you to focus up and down and side to side and all around the entire world, all beings of the world. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free. May it be so.
May
The secret Gospel of John, or the Apocryphon of John, is one of the oldest books in existence. Likely written in Greek sometime in the 2nd century and translated into Coptic Egyptian sometime in the 4th century, 4 different versions still exist today. Now that doesn't sound like much, but for a text that is so old, finding 4 of them indicates that it was a very important text of its day. Known by scholars as one of the classic Gnostic texts, the secret Gospel of John offers a very different interpretation of the creation story than the one we find in the Bible in the book of Genesis. As you listen, I invite you to compare what you are hearing to the biblical creation story that I'm sure we all know, in which God creates humanity in his own image, and Eve is created from Adam's side, and Eve gives into temptation and eats the apple of knowledge and brings death and sin into the world. So compare that to what you hear now.
The Father is surrounded by light. He apprehends himself in that light. He is conscious of his image everywhere around him, perceiving his image in this spring of spirit pouring forth from himself. He is enamored of the image he sees in the light water, the spring of pure light water enveloping him. His self-aware thought came into being, appearing to him in the effulgence of his light. She stood before him. This, then, is the first of the powers, prior to everything, arising out of the mind of the Father, the providence of everything. Her light reflects his light.
It happened that wisdom, also known as Sophia, began to think for herself. She intended to reveal an image from herself without the invisible Spirit's consent. Without the knowledge of her partner, she brought it into being. Something imperfect came out of her, different in appearance from her. She gave rise to a misshapen being unlike herself. She cast him far away from her, outside of the realm of the immortal beings, so they could not see him, because she had created him in ignorance. She named him Yaldabaoth.
Yaldabaoth said, "I am God, and there is no God but me." Since he didn't know where his power originated, Yaldabaoth said to his subordinate demons, "Let us create a man according to the image of God and our own likeness, so that his image will illuminate us."
All of Yaldabaoth's servants and his demons worked to finish the body. For a very long time, it lay inanimate. It did not move. Yaldabaoth blew some of his spirit into the man, but that spirit was the divine power of his mother.
The human body moved. It grew powerful. It shone. Yaldabaoth's demonic forces envied the man. The man's understanding was far greater than those who had created him, and greater than that of Yaldabaoth himself. When they realized that he shone with light and could think better than they could and was naked of evil, they took him and cast him down into the lowest depths of the material world.
The rulers took the man and put him into paradise. They told him to eat freely, They placed the tree of life into the middle of paradise, and as for the tree called the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they commanded him not to eat of it, standing in front to conceal it.
The Blessed One, the Mother, Father, the good, merciful One, sent down a helper to Adam. She aids the entire creation, working with him, restoring him to fullness. She taught Adam about the way his people had descended. She taught Adam about the way he could ascend, which is the way he had descended.
After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. In the film The Matrix, we're presented with a world in which human beings have been trapped within a dreamscape. People believe that they're just going about their lives in the real world, when in fact they're imprisoned in these pod-like structures, and their so-called reality is only an illusion. The blue pill or the red pill? That concept blew a lot of people's minds when the film came out, and there are still plenty of sci-fi geeks and conspiracy theorists who are kind of obsessed with it. But the idea that what we think is real is not actually true was nothing new. In fact, it's quite an ancient idea. It's an idea that flourished back in the first centuries of early Christianity within a religious and philosophical movement known as the Gnostics. Gnostic, as Marshall mentioned, comes from the Greek word that means to know. And what the Gnostics wanted to know was the truth. They wanted to go down the rabbit hole and find the answers to the questions: where do we come from? What are we? Look up Gnosticism today, and you'll see it described as a heresy, much as Unitarianism was once, and for some still is, a heresy. But heresy just means an opinion that is contrary to the official one. To be a heretic really just means to have a choice. Many traditions that are now called heresies started out just as choices. When Christianity was first coming into being as a discernible faith, there were lots of choices available. There were many different ways of being Christian, and no one of them was the right way. There's nothing wrong with having choices. It's only when someone in a position of power believes that your choice is a threat to theirs that your choice becomes a crime, that heresy becomes a crime. And it only becomes a serious crime if the powers that be think that your choice is a serious threat to them. And this is exactly what happened in many different schools of early Christian thought, including Gnosticism. The 2nd century bishop of Lyon, Irenaeus, referred to the Gnostics as malignant-minded people, inventors of perversity, and firstborn of Satan. So who were these people that Irenaeus was talking about, and why were they such a threat to him and to others like him who were so busy trying to carve out one right way to be Christian, one orthodoxy? Well, first, the people that Irenaeus despised so fiercely did not refer to themselves as Gnostics. They would have simply called themselves Christians, which is one reason why they were such a threat. They weren't the other. They were Irenaeus's neighbors, even people within his own church. They shared some beliefs and some ideas, but in other areas they thought very differently, which made them a special kind of threat. As we know, it's often the people we're closest to that bother us the most. The ancient texts don't tell us much about what Gnostic groups did or how they lived their lives, but they do reveal some interesting things and interesting ways that they answered these questions: where do we come from? What are we? Many have a creation myth that goes something like what we read earlier in the secret Gospel of John. That story goes like this. In the beginning, there is only one God, infinite, indescribable, complete, perfect. But one day, God considers God's own self. God now becomes the thinker and the thought of. The thinker and the thought then create from themselves a third entity, all still perfect, all still part of the whole, just distinct. Well, once you have a party of three, things really start to happen. The divine wholeness just keeps dividing and dividing, but always remaining in balance, all united and whole, until one day, the youngest of these pieces of God, known as wisdom or Sophia, decides she wants to create something of her very own. But in breaking off from this wholeness, what she creates is no longer perfect. What she creates is a being who thinks that he is God alone. And this new being is jealous and petty. And he does things like flooding the entire world because he's angry at it, if that rings a bell. Sounds familiar? And all the things that he creates in the material world are all deeply flawed. And this is how Gnostics explained how bad things can come out of that which is perfect. But when Sophia's creature, this self-proclaimed God, breathes life into human beings, he accidentally transfers into them the nature of his creator, the spirit of perfect wholeness, the divine spark. Human beings just don't realize that they have God within them, because the guy who thinks that he's God, he likes to be the only one. So in this vision, the Garden of Eden isn't paradise, but is just a pretty prison. Think about the world in that movie, The Matrix. And when Eve eats the fruit of the tree of knowledge, she isn't ushering sin and death into the world. She's starting humanity on a path toward beginning to understand who we are and where we came from. Eve is the hero in this version of the story. And as Marshall noted, the problem of humanity isn't sin, it's ignorance. For Christian Gnostics, then, Jesus didn't have to die for anybody's sins. For them, Jesus' death was the least important thing about him. What was important was his message to suffering, ignorant humanity. The kingdom of God is within you. With that knowledge, that gnosis, the individual could once again achieve union with the divine. And to get there, they believed you didn't have to belong to a specific church. You didn't have to live by any set of rules. You didn't have to proclaim your faith and be martyred in a Roman Colosseum. You didn't have to listen to priests and bishops. A little bit like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, the Gnostics believed you can always go home. Their ruby slippers were the secret of spiritual knowledge. Now, it's a huge understatement to say that I'm oversimplifying things. But I hope I've given you at least a sense of what Gnosticism was about. And while it might feel like a stretch, I want to suggest that modern-day Unitarian Universalists, in the way we practice our faith, can sometimes be a little Gnostic-ish. And some of these similarities are beautiful and empowering, and others are problematic. The first way that you use can sometimes act a little Gnostic is when we envision spiritual seeking as something that each of us does on our own. But while we celebrate the fact that UUs have no creed or doctrine and that we encourage each person to find their own ultimate meaning, that should not be a solitary pursuit. Key to Unitarian Universalism is the way that we hold one another and support one another in our spiritual search. It's when we go off and create our own completely independent theologies and philosophies with no grounding in community or concern for others that we can be a little like Sophia in that creation story, creating little monsters. Being together religiously matters. That's why coming to church is important. And participating in community rituals ranging from formal UU rituals like the beautiful flower ceremony that we do every spring to less formal ones like drinking coffee after the Sunday service. That's important because we need to be reminded that we do not seek our truth alone, but always in company. The second way that I think UUs can appear a bit Gnostic is in the way we can sometimes privilege individual freedom over responsibility, over the bonds and responsibilities of community. The bishops of early Orthodox Christianity claimed that their power rested in their direct connection to the disciples of Jesus, the men who supposedly witnessed the death and the resurrection of Christ. But because the ancient Gnostics didn't believe that Jesus' death was the most important thing about him, many didn't even think that he could die because he was a completely spiritual being. The authority of the apostles was meaningless. "You aren't the boss of me" might have been a Gnostic mantra, just as it is for many Unitarian Universalists. Some mistrust of authority is healthy, and it's a critical part of being progressive. But hyper-individualism and the lack of trust can lead to my way or the highway kind of thinking and the fracturing of communities. Power rests in communities. And community only works if people are willing to bend a little bit for the sake of the common good. What Orthodox Christianity had was power. The Gnostics did not. And finally, I want to talk about the problem of exclusivity. Gnostics generally believed that the divine spark is within every single person, but many of them also believed that in some people, the pilot light has gone out. Some people, they thought, were beyond help. There's a reason many of the Gnostic texts have that word secret in the title, because the truth, the red pill, if you will, wasn't accessible to just anyone. You had to be a special kind of person to be able to handle the truth. There is one reason why the Gnostics were so irritating to other Christians. Irenaeus, for example, described the Gnostics as essentially know-it-alls. Their emphasis on arcane knowledge made them seem pretty stuck up to other folks. I worry this is how Unitarian Universalists can sometimes appear to visitors and newcomers when we speak dismissively of other faiths, when we emphasize intelligence over embodied or mystical experience, when we say things like, and these are things I've actually heard, well, those people won't want to come to our church because we aren't Jesus-y enough. Or they won't want to come because our creedless faith is too hard to understand. When we say things like that, we are in effect saying that only some of us are good enough to know the truth. And this, of course, is completely counter to our roots in universalism, which has always affirmed that every single person is worthy. Every single person is welcome. Every single person is held in love, regardless of their education or their intelligence or their insight, regardless of what they know. Like Marshall, I have been fascinated by the Gnostics for a long time, and I am also very happy to geek out about them with you. There is so much richness in their writings, so much empowering creativity in their dismantling of toxic stories. The way they played with gender stereotypes and with binaries, their insistence that the kingdom of God is already here within us, their refusal to believe that only bishops and priests hold the answers, their confidence that each one of us can know wholeness and perfect love. All these things are amazing. And I can find aspects of these beliefs in my Unitarian Universalist faith. But I think the Gnostics also offer a warning, something that I think Unitarian Universalists might want to take to heart. These are warnings against isolated spirituality, hyper-individualism, and exclusivity or feelings of superiority. We can't allow these tendencies to bring us down, because what this faith has to offer, what this church has to offer, is too good, too precious to be silenced. This I know. Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn. It's in our gray hardbound hymnal, number 337, Have I Not Known? This hymn may not be familiar to you, but I bet the melody is. It's the Chariots of Fire tune.
Have I not known the sky and sea? Put on a look and hushed and still, as if some ancient prophecy drew close upon to be fulfilled. Like mist the houses shrink and swell, like blood the highways throb and beat, the supple stones beneath my feet turn foliate with mirror and life and death but one thing are, and I have seen this wingless world cast with impermanence and world like dust across the summer's swirl, and I have dealt with presences behind the veils of time and place, and I have seen this water star, bright shining, wonderful in space.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community, which burns on in our hearts.
After our service today, all are welcome to join us in Daniel Hall for coffee and fellowship. If this is your first time with us, to get to Daniel Hall, just go through these doors down the hallway, and it's the first doors on your right. I've also been asked to remind you that next week, November 12th, our Fiber Arts group will be holding a sale of all handmade items. And the items that are sold, the funds will be raised to go to our music fund. And now I leave you with this benediction. Go now in peace, and may the divine spark that lives within each one of you shine on and on and on. May it be so.
Amen.